Here. Welcome in, everybody. I know that some of you have already attended a few of our events today. I appreciate you all sticking around. This is a really exciting panel and a really great opportunity to hear about our experiential learning opportunities at Villanova Law. We are very prideful about our experiential learning opportunities, of course, externships and clinics. The dean talked a little bit earlier about 2 new clinics that you'll hear more about today. And one of our current students is actually a representative of that clinic here today on this panel. So I want to welcome you in. Feel free to ask questions today during this panel of our professors, but also of our current students. You have the Q&A box there. So whenever a question pops into your head, throw it into the Q&A box. That way we can at least, collect questions there, and then they'll be able to get to all of your questions once they're finished with their formal presentation. I'm going to turn it over now to our Director of Externships, Matt McGovern, and then afterwards, if the students would like to introduce themselves, that would be really helpful as well.
Thank you, Phil. Welcome again, everyone. Thank you for making time to virtually visit Villanova. My name's Matt McGovern, and I'm the director of the Externship program. Here at Villanova, our experiential learning program has 2 sides, the externships, which I manage, and the clinics, which Professor Caitlin Berry manages and directs, and she'll be with us in a few minutes. We also have with us 2 fabulous students who have had externship experiences, and they're in clinics, I think, this semester. All right, so let me tell you a little bit about externships. This is who we've got here. It'll be me and Professor Berry, and then our 2 students. An externship is a legal work experience where a student leaves the campus and goes to work with some outside organization under the supervision either of a judge in the law clerks or a practicing attorney. And they learn how to practice law, and they get school credit for it, and they count it toward their degree. When I think about the type of places that students work in externships, in my head, I usually categorize them in 6 different categories. The most popular one is with judges and courts. Every semester and every summer, we usually have 1/4 to 1/3 of our externs working with state and federal judges on the trial and appellate level. So that's the biggest single category. And then for the non-judicial externs, they do all kinds of different things. They work with government agencies on the federal level, at the state level, even at the local level. From time to time, we have externs working with the Philadelphia City Law Department. And then we have externs working in-house counsel with different companies and nonprofit organizations, which I would call corporate legal department externships. We have a lot of students that learn to practice criminal law, either with prosecutors or defenders. That could be district attorneys at the counties here in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and other places, or on the federal level with the U.S. Attorney's Office, and also on the defense side, either at the city public defender office or one in the counties, or even with the federal public defenders. We also have students that do externships with public interest organizations. Leslie did in the summer. I think Casey's headed to one this coming summer, and that will be legal aid offices and other things like that. And we just had someone join, and I lost my slides. The last category is our private law firms. Not every law school permits students to earn credit doing externships in private firms, but Villanova does. All right, let me see if I can get my slides back up again. There we go. Okay, I've got text with examples here. I thought it might be helpful for you to see specific places where we frequently have extern students. So this slide has logos from a lot of the different organizations that host our externs and where they have terrific practice experiences and learning experiences. I mentioned courts and judges, so they're represented here on the left-hand side by that blue banner that has the seal of Pennsylvania, representing the Pennsylvania courts. On the right-hand side, we've got the U.S. courts. We have plenty of extern students that work in the trial and appellate courts on the federal level. And then also we're close to the state of New Jersey, and we frequently have students there. Now, in the summertime, when students sometimes go home to the state where they came from, if it's not Pennsylvania or New Jersey, we've had externs enroll in our externship class and meet with us virtually while they're working with judges and courts in other states. Pretty much every summer we have at least one in the New York New York courts, but it could be other states as well. And then we have examples of other types of externship placements there. At the top, you'll see Allied Universal, which is a security services company. I think they have security guards at the Philadelphia airport, in addition to the TSA personnel that are there. We have our own public safety force and police force at Villanova, but Allied Universal security personnel will assist in other college campuses. If you know someone that went to the University of Pittsburgh, I know the security guards walking around that campus have an Allied Universal patch on their shoulder. So that's an example of a profit-making company where we frequently have extern students. And then on the other side at the top, you can see Children's Hospital, which is a nonprofit organization. And we have students that work in the in-house counsel office there. And I could tell you details about any of the logos on here, representing a lot of the different types of places where students do externships. I think I only have one from a government agency, which is at the bottom. The Securities and Exchange Commission has a round symbol or seal there. We have a strong business law faculty and a number of students that want to go into business law. And so they like to do externships with the SEC, which regulates the securities industry. A couple of examples of the criminal practice area are at the top right, the District Attorney's Office for Philadelphia or the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. And then in the middle, the Innocence Project, and in the lower left, the Defender Association, which does the trial work in the city. And there's a couple of examples of subject-specific public interest organizations. The Clean Air Council is someplace that a number of our students have done externships if they're interested in environmental law. And below that, the Philadelphia Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts is a terrific organization that helps artists and musicians of different kinds. So if you're interested in the entertainment industry or in intellectual property in terms of brands and trademarks and things like that. All right. That's a number of examples. These are places that our students frequently have externships, but it's a flexible program, and I'm ready to talk to you if you have a proposal for a different type of externship. We would call that an independent placement, and every summer and every semester there are a number of independent placements. Some of the ones that I think are particularly exciting include Children's Hospital at the top of the slide. It's one of the premier institutions for pediatric medicine in the country. So would they regularly take our externs, and students that are interested in healthcare law enjoy that one a lot. This year, we've had several exciting ones. We had a student working with the top attorney for the New York Jets in the fall semester. So he traveled up to New York a couple of days a week and worked with her. And I thought she was just fabulous. She was very helpful to him and tried to find appropriate assignments for him and other things. In addition to that, we've had externs before at the Barnes Foundation, which is a terrific art gallery down in the city. And I've been talking recently to the top attorney there, who's trying to make arrangements to make room for an extern student for the next fall semester. So I expect that one to resume and continue. We have a fabulous alum who's the employment law specialist for Louis Vuitton. So you'll see their logo at the top of the screen. And she's had our externs in her Manhattan office before. And the New York City was hit hard by COVID, but they plan to resume that in the next fall semester. So I hope to have students back there. And one final one that's especially exciting and unusual, we had a student with family connections in Hawaii a couple of years ago, and he was seriously considering practicing law on the island. So he found a position with the legal aid office in Hawaii, and we were able to make arrangements for that to be an externship for him. They had someone take another job, and they had an opening for a position in that office. So the student worked there in their final semester of law school and worked there full time and did it as an externship, and then found a position there after school. So that was terrific. It's a flexible program, and we can help you look for unique opportunities. There was a question in the chat about interviewing, and there are different ways that students apply for these externships. Some of them do interviews, and then we have some standing externships that reserve positions for Villanova students. So it depends on the host organization. They don't work for us, so I try to diplomatically work with them to make it the best for the students and as easy as possible for students to apply and get in there. But some of the places do interviews and some don't. All right. Maybe you'd like to know what students do when they go to these terrific host organizations. So this slide lists the type of things that are typical of what students do. Casey and Leslie can tell you that we teach them about legal research and writing and a lot of other things in the first year, and then they get to go use those skills out in practice in their externships. Our students often do a lot of legal research, but also investigating facts and preparing facts for cases and arguments. They may assist with the preparation for litigation, some type of hearing in court, or the pretrial phase where there's a deposition and gathering of documents and evidence and similar proceedings like that. Sometimes they will analyze regulations issued by government agencies or help companies respond to or comply with those regulations. If there's a new proposed regulation, they may submit comments on behalf of their client or help draft those to comment on the regulation or ask questions about it. They're often helping with drafting legal documents or revising legal documents that could be letters to clients or the opposing side. It could be contracts or things that will be filed with the court, such as briefs or petitions. Certainly, our students that work with courts and judges will help them drafting their opinions. All right. And finally, they participate in sessions where the attorneys counsel their clients and get information from their clients or negotiate agreements with the other sides. I think the next question that came in the Q&A related to my next slide about how students find externships. And there are a number of ways that the school helps students find externships that they're interested in. I provide a lot of information about judges and courts where we've had externs and that have accepted Villanova students in the past and how to apply for those, and also the non-judicial externship organizations. As I mentioned before, there are a few standing positions where we send students and they expect a few from Villanova every semester. The school has its own employer fair in the spring semester that's coming up soon, but we also participate in larger employment fairs that host a lot of the places that have law offices in the area, and the other law schools participate in those as well, the other law schools around Philadelphia. Like a lot of schools, we have an electronic system where we post job announcements and announcements for externships where students can see it 24/7, and it'll describe the placement and how to apply and things like that. Our career strategy office has a thriving on-campus interview system where organizations that take externs or take students for paid jobs will come on campus either virtually or in person to interview students. Our faculty have lots of connections and our alumni help out. In fact, a lot of the externship placements involve students learning how to practice law under the teaching and mentorship of someone who used to be a Villanova law student. And then I meet with groups of students and individually with students to talk about their interests and what options might be open to them. All right, the final slide that I have is just to mention a few of the things that I think are particular strengths of Villanova's program. There are a lot of opportunities. If you look on our website, it says that last year we had more than 330 externships. This year it's 342. There are a lot of students doing a lot of different things. We offer a wide variety of practice settings. Not every school permits externships in private firms and for-profit companies, but we do. So you have the flexibility to choose the practice setting that works best for you. In addition to that, we permit paid externships. Some schools don't allow that with certain restrictions on the timing and the number of credits. We do allow both externships where the student is paid for their work and unpaid externships. We have a strong alumni network. The faculty do advising along the way while students are doing their externships. And I have classroom sessions with the students to teach them about things that cross over many practice settings and types of practice, and also so that they can hear from each other a little bit about what it's like to work in a different office or a different practice where they don't have experience themselves. All right, I would like to turn over the microphone to Professor Berry so she can tell you about our clinics. I would like to clear up any questions or confusion if there is any. Let me just check this last question that came into the Q&A. How does one go about proposing an independent externship? Are there times in which they're rejected for certain reasons? Well, the major thing that we want to make sure of with an independent placement is that each student will have a strong learning experience and a strong practice experience, and that they will learn the skills and other things they need to be a successful practitioner. So those externships will end up in credits that you'll count towards your degree, and you'll have a diploma with Villanova's name on it. And we want to make sure that those credits were well earned and you learned how to practice law. So students submit an application to me for an independent placement that says who they are and where they plan to work and what they expect to do. And then I can talk to them about whether I think that's a strong practice experience, and I'll communicate with the people that they work with. And if I don't think it's strong, I can give them suggestions for how to improve it, and then it can be approved. It's done on a case-by-case basis, though, so I couldn't give a blanket approval for all kinds of externships, but I'm happy to talk to any student about a particular one. With 342 a year, there's certainly a lot of them. And as long as it will be a strong practice and learning experience, it's very likely to be eligible for credit.
Matt, I was going to jump in really quickly. And again, before Professor Berry gets started, I figured, Professor Berry, if you're okay with it, if I can just turn it over to the students really quickly. Leslie, Casey, if you both want to introduce yourselves. Casey, I'll get you started first, and just maybe name where you went to college for undergrad, class year, what you did for your externship. And then after Leslie does her introduction, then maybe if you both can sort of speak to that experience before Professor Berry gets into the clinical side of things.
Yeah, of course. My name is Casey Brogan. I am a 2L. I graduated from the University of Oregon for undergrad. And then my externship was my 1L summer. I worked in a judicial externship for a federal district court judge in Philly.
Hey guys, my name is Leslie. I am a 2L class of 2024. I went to undergrad at Arcadia University in Glenside, Pennsylvania. And for my 1L externship during the summer, it was actually one of those independent ones that I had to ask Professor McGovern for approval, but it was at a public interest organization known as the Legal Clinic for the Disabled. And that was really fun. I could talk more about that if you like.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess I would just say that before Professor Berry gets started, if you all just wanted to share a little bit about your experience there, the types of things that you were able to work on and experience, and sort of how it ties back to what, Professor McGovern was sharing about the classroom component and sort of the mentorship you receive here at the law school that kind of ties everything together. Just a couple of brief statements would be great, because we'll definitely get back to that after Professor Berry covers clinics.
I can say that during your 1L year, there's certain classes that you have to take. And what I really enjoyed about the externship is how I was able to have a hands-on, actually utilize the things I learned in the classroom. For example, I was reading statutes and writing legal memorandums already as a 1L summer. During my 1L summer. And if it wasn't for the experience I've had in class to introduce me in the best way to write a memorandum, how to effectively do legal research, I would have had a really hard time. I was interacting with clients on landlord and tenant issues. I've never dealt with landlord and tenant issues in my life. And it was amazing, because I learned about a new area of the law that it turns out I'm really interested in. And I had the tools, because of the classes that I took during my 1L year, to actually do really, really good. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think a judicial externship is pretty common for someone's first externship experience. I really liked it because I didn't come from a law background at all. So it was really helpful for me to kind of build a foundation of, the legal process from the viewpoint of the judge. And I worked for Judge Slomsky, who I find is particularly invested in the learning and educational aspects of the externship program. So what I spent most of my time on last summer was a lot of legal research and writing on matters that were on his docket. So I spent most of my summer writing an opinion on a motion to sever defendant's trial. So all the interns worked on a writing assignment, but you also spend a lot of time just observing a lot of the court proceedings. So I saw tons of sentencings, hearings, motion or hearings just with him in his chambers. So it just provided a lot of background on the whole process, which I think is helpful going into this upcoming summer. I'll be working more on the client side, and I can know what to expect in court and things like that.
And if I may add just to that, just because it's a legal internship doesn't mean all you'll do is just do legal research and legal writing. A lot of what I did during my 1L summer was talk to clients really heavily, over 50% of what I did is talk to clients and advise them on the law. So it's a good exposure on how to interact with clients early on, because if you're going to be an attorney, it's a hurdle. If you're not comfortable talking to people, then I really encourage you to take the opportunity to do an externship or a clinic, because you'll be doing a lot of talking.
Awesome. Thank you both. And like I said, we're going to get back to you all later as well to share more about your experiences. I want to turn it over to Professor Berry, and I think Professor McGovern will probably turn back on the slides as well so we can go through them. But Professor Berry holds so many titles at the law school half the time. I don't even remember all of them, but she's a professor of law, director of the Farmworker Legal Aid Clinic, director of the clinical program, and also participates with the community interpreter internship program here as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Professor Berry to share with you all about our fantastic clinical program, which just keeps growing and growing, which is probably the most exciting part.
Thanks so much, Phil, and thanks so much for having me today. I apologize, I was a few minutes late joining. I was actually out with students, meeting with some clients. We were actually at a high school meeting with some young people there who need legal assistance, and I was a little late getting back. So thank you so much for having me. Before we move forward, there was one more question about externships, which Professor McGovern wanted to give you a chance to answer. It was about international externships. And I am happy to share that Villanova is actually going to be launching a program in South Africa. There's going to be a social entrepreneurship program that's going to be a partnership with the university in Cape Town. It's brand new. It's not available to our current students yet, but it is going to be starting soon. So Matt, did you want to say anything else about international externships before we move on?
If I turn on my microphone, that would help. Yes, we've had several international externships. We are planning to develop a standing one, as Professor Berry mentioned, in South Africa. We have a student scheduled to work with a litigator in Lyon, France this summer. There is a special relationship between the Philadelphia Bar Association and a sister bar association in Lyon, and they have exchanged attorneys to come work at firms here, and they've taken students over there in the summertime. So we're going to have another one of those this summer. In the past, we've had students in London and in Dublin and in The Hague in the Netherlands, and also before in South Africa with another program, not through Villanova. So it's possible as an independent placement, and I would seek to support students that want to do that in addition to our standing program that we're developing right now. Thank you for that opportunity, Caitlin.
Great, and we'll have some more time hopefully towards the end for more questions. I'll try and get through this as quickly as possible so we can get back to the students who are the real star of the show today. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of our clinical program, and just to explain a little bit about the differences between externships and clinics. For those of you who are going to a lot of these events at law schools and trying to make a decision about where you want to go, it's important to pay attention to the details of the program that a school is describing. Schools use a lot of different names for practical programs like externships and clinics. Some schools will have programs that they call clinics, but which are actually what we would call externships, where you're going out and working for another organization or another firm. At Villanova, our clinics are all in-house, literally meaning they're in the building. And so I'm going to go over the programs that we have, and I'll talk a little bit about the sort of difference between an externship and a clinic. I'm a huge fan of all experiential educational opportunities, and I think students should do both. I think they have some they both have really unique benefits, and you have plenty of time in your time in law school to do both, and to even do multiple externships and a clinic. So you can go ahead and move to the next slide, Professor McGovern. So we like to joke in the clinic that when you've been sitting in class for your first year of law school, you have been reading the instruction manual for how to put together IKEA furniture. Once you get into clinic, you're actually given the furniture and allowed to build it. And so that's sort of a way to think about what it is like to step into a clinic. You have been reading about the law, you've been hearing from lawyers talk about what it's like to practice law. Clinic is an opportunity to actually step in and practice law. And so much so that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court has actually created practice rules that recognize that students in clinics are actually practicing law. They are going to be the lead representatives in their cases. So students in clinic are going to be the ones doing all of the interviewing, all of the counseling, They're going to be advising clients on what their legal rights are, helping clients make decisions. If you're negotiating with opposing counsel, you will be doing the negotiation. If you're in a litigation clinic, like the one I teach, when we go to court, you are going to sit at counsel's table and I'm going to sit back in the gallery. And that's one of the hallmark differences between clinics and externships, where with an externship, you're more likely to be assisting an attorney. So as Professor McGovern was explaining, you may be drafting documents. You will hopefully be supported in seeing that document all the way through, but then you'll be handing it to the attorney who's going to go and actually advocate for the client in court. In clinic, you're going to be doing all that work yourself. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide. Thank you so much. So here's a photo of our beautiful lobby of our clinical program. For those of you who are able to visit the law school, the clinic is located right on the first floor, right when you first walk into the building. And that was an intentional choice when the building was designed to really showcase clinics as the heart and soul of the law school, which is how the president of the university described it. To show that the law school is committed to providing free legal services within the building and committed to supporting students and being able to participate in those opportunities while they're in law school. And so you're able to stop by the clinic office, do some work on your case, meet with a client, and then leave and go upstairs and go to your classes. So we really want to make it possible for students to take advantage of all the opportunities in a clinic. You can go ahead to the next slide. So we are, as Phil was explaining, it's exciting that we are actually launching some new clinics. So by the time students enroll for next year, we are going to have 8 in-house clinics at Villanova. The Intellectual Property Clinic is our newest clinic. It will be launching in the spring of next year. This year, we started the Caritas Clemency Clinic. So I'll talk a little bit about what each clinic does. Our asylum clinic, which Leslie can talk to you about, is our clinic that represents people seeking asylum, refugee status, and other forms of immigration status here in the U.S. Is one of our first clinics at Villanova. It is sort of a hallmark program here, and it's also our clinic that enrolls for the most credits, and so students get to do the more work for more credit in that clinic. Our civil justice clinic, which is taught by Professor Dia Halder, represents survivors of domestic violence in a range of different civil proceedings. They handle protection from abuse orders and other family law custody matters. They do landlord-tenant work. They do some employment discrimination work. They try to operate as a holistic clinic that will meet the needs of their clients in whatever way they can in civil legal proceedings. The Clinic for Law and Entrepreneurship, taught by Professor Komal Vaidya, is a really interesting program. So they practice transactional law. So they don't litigate, they don't go to court. They are representing small businesses, nonprofits, and other types of community organizations who have a social justice mission. So they are working with people who are trying to start up a new business that is in some way trying to serve the community. They're representing nonprofits who want to establish themselves, who want to formally incorporate and need advice on the best way to structure their organization. The Farmworker Clinic is the clinic that I teach. We represent farm workers and their families in civil legal matters. We are also a holistic clinic where we will do anything that our clients ask us to do as long as we think we can do it well. We do a lot of deportation defense. We also do some family law and some employment law. We had a client last semester who wanted some help with a truancy case. And so we ended up having to educate ourselves about truancy and we're able to assist that family as well. We also do some support for organizations that are led by farm workers around the state. And I can talk about that a little bit more if people are interested. In the tax clinic, they represent low-income taxpayers who the government believes have a debt to the IRS. And so they represent taxpayers to understand their rights, to understand whether or not the debt was actually appropriately instituted, and if it was, to negotiate it to a point where it's actually feasible for the person to pay it. Professor Christine Spidel, who directs the tax clinic, always likes to remind us that the federal tax system is actually the biggest public benefit provider in the country at this point. It's the biggest distributor of benefits through the tax system. And so much of what they're doing is anti-poverty work. In the health law clinic, we represent individuals who are facing legal issues related to their health care. They primarily focus on guardianship for incapacitated individuals and on healthcare access where someone needs a particular type of care and the insurance company is saying no. In the clemency clinic, they represent people who are serving prison sentences in federal prison. and who would like to seek release for a range of different reasons, frequently related to their medical care that they're unable to access while they're in prison. That is actually our only year-long clinic. So students are actually taking that clinic for 2 semesters. They represent clients all over the country. So they had students who were traveling to visit clients in prison in San Francisco, in Texas, in North Carolina. That was the only way that they were actually able to meet with their clients to get the information they needed to file their motions. And we will be launching the Intellectual Property Clinic, which is going to be representing people seeking patents. And again, that will be starting in the spring of next year. Our advanced clinic is actually an opportunity that students in any clinic would have to apply to do an additional semester. So if you took a clinic and you really loved the work, you wanted to see, you wanted to take a case to the next level, or you wanted to try a different type of case, you could apply to stay on for an additional semester and do an advanced clinic. So we can go ahead and move through the slides. So I'm just going to share some quotes about each clinic and some examples of some of the work that they're doing. In the Clinic for Law and Entrepreneurship, here's a picture of Professor Vaidy and some students who worked with the Pennsylvania Cooperative Alliance to do some Know Your Rights workshops for folks who are interested in starting cooperative businesses, talking about the benefits of running your business cooperatively. We can move on to the next slide. In the Civil Justice Clinic, these were students who had represented a family where it was a young person who had actually migrated to the United States by herself and was reunited with a sibling, and the sibling was actually seeking custody of her younger sister so that she could have a guardian here in the United States. And so students went to court and represented the family in that proceeding. Go ahead to the next slide. An example of a type of case handled in the Health Law Clinic, Professor Campbell was just talking to me about a client who is a quadriplegic who needs a particular type of chair to be able to get out of bed in the morning. It's incredibly expensive, as is most things that you're going to be seeking through the healthcare system, and the insurance company had denied paying for it, and the family wasn't able to afford it. And so students represented that client before the healthcare with the healthcare company, and were able to advocate for their client and convince the healthcare company to pay for it. Go ahead to the next slide. Here's a picture of the Federal Tax Clinic on a day that they went to tax court. Several times a year, they will attend tax court, and they will actually be representing folks who don't have representation, who may have just shown up in court that day, trying to help them understand what's happening in their case, and potentially on the spot having to negotiate with the IRS to assist them with their tax burden. Go ahead to the next slide. In the Farmworker Clinic, there's a photo of 2 students who were preparing a motion. And so these are all their exhibits that they had laid out that they were about to assemble to file. So these were students who actually represented a client who had been working on a farm in Southeast Pennsylvania, and immigration agents had come and raided the farm. And the students developed a legal theory to defend their client from his deportation, that the immigration agents had racially profiled our client because they didn't know anything about him, and selected him apparently on the basis of his appearance and his language ability to detain and interrogate him. And the students very creatively actually went out to the farm and took photos of the outside of the farm with these giant signs saying, private area, no trespassing, no one allowed who doesn't work here. And were able to successfully argue in court that the immigration agents didn't have permission to be at the farm, and that by doing so, they had violated our client's Fourth Amendment rights to be free from searches and seizures, and that they had racially profiled him in violation of his other constitutional rights. So a really interesting case. And we can go on to the next slide. And so this is the CARES Clinic. We had a symposium a few years ago, and we had a beautiful virtual note taker who was taking notes. So in addition to their individual representation of their clients, they also put on a symposium every year. This year's is actually going to be tomorrow. It's going to focus on sanctuary. So there's going to be a group of speakers, including a keynote address from a woman who lived in sanctuary in a church in Philadelphia for a year, talking about the importance of offering protection to people who are fleeing violence here in our own community. So those are just some of the examples of some of the things that people do in clinic. And so why don't I just take a look at the Q&A here. So great questions to should students start with doing an externship first and then transition into a clinic, vice versa, or it doesn't matter? I don't think that the order matters. I think, again, there's unique benefits to both. Externships are such incredible opportunities to get exposed to a range of different types of practice, to see how different organizations are run, how different law offices are run, to meet mentors, to network, and to get some really practical experience in a range of different practice areas. And with clinic, you're getting, again, sort of more of that leadership and ownership opportunity to really build a deep and significant relationship with a client. And so I don't necessarily think the order matters. For students who are going to be in a clinic that practices state law, again, those state practice rules that I mentioned require you to have completed 3 semesters of law school. So you wouldn't actually be eligible until the 2nd semester of your 2nd year. With externships, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but students could take them in the fall semester of their 2L year.
Yes. Timing wise, the first opportunity to do an externship is after the 1st year. So there are a lot of externs in the 1st summer, and that's before a student could be in the clinic. So as a practical matter, they often do have externships first. And since I believe the 3rd year students get priority for the seats in the clinic, they like it so much, they often fill up most of the seats.
Yeah, so that's great. So I would say the order doesn't matter, and taking advantage of both opportunities is fantastic. So it just depends on what your preference is. Do you have to have a science degree or background to be eligible for the IP clinic? So the new director of the clinic has not yet created the application process. I don't believe there's going to be a requirement to have a science background. In fact, I know for sure the clinic that he's running right now does not require students to have a particular background. Of course, if you do have a science background or a particular passion for a specific area, that might be helpful. But I don't believe he's going to be requiring that to participate in the IP clinic. Do you see students participating in more than one clinical program at a time? So you actually can't take more than one clinic. Although you can, after you've taken a clinic, you can apply for an advanced semester in another clinic. So after a student has taken the Farmworker clinic, they could apply for an advanced semester in the entrepreneurship clinic, for example. The reason that we don't allow students to take more than one is that we all teach very core lawyering skills. We all teach interviewing, we all teach counseling, we all teach time management, client management, collaboration. And so you can't really take the same course twice, if that makes sense, even though you would be practicing in a different area. So we only allow you to take one clinic, although again, you may be able to take an advanced clinic in another field. Does the Farmworker clinic mostly work with labor law, immigration law, or other fields of law? So I actually can't predict what the Farmworker clinic is going to be doing from one semester to the next, because we allow our clients to tell us what they need. It may be that we are only getting requests for help with immigration cases. And so we are going to be doing nothing but immigration. This semester, it's almost entirely family law. We are spending most of our time in custody court. And again, last semester, we spent a lot of time on a truancy case and dealing with some education matters. So I actually can't predict anything other than that you'll be working with farm workers and their families. How competitive are the clinic spots? We have been able to get every student into a clinic who wanted to take a clinic by the time they graduated, as long as you can be flexible with the timing. So you may not get into your top choice the exact semester that you wanted it, but if you're open to taking it in a different semester, or if you're possibly open to taking more than one clinic. So if students apply to civil justice as their first choice and they have farm workers as their second, and civil justice fills up quickly, and you're open to taking a farm worker clinic, if you can be a little flexible with us, we will definitely get you into a clinic. And most likely you're going to get your first choice if you can be patient with the timing. What future prospects goals do you have for the clinic program, and how will it impact students in their education? It's an interesting question that I'm not totally sure how to answer. I'm very excited that we are expanding the program. I'm very excited that we have such a vibrant public interest program here that's going to give students so many opportunities, and that we're going to have more seats for more students to practice. How are students selected for the clinic is also a great question. Half of our clinics have an application where you're selected based on your application, and half are by lottery. So that's another reason why everyone will get into a clinic, as long as you can be a little flexible with us. The application process is really just trying to select students with a range of different interests so that we can have a nice comparison of perspectives and experiences in the classroom. And then the other clinics, mine included, are selected by lottery. Do you see many students participate in externships clinics while also in a dual degree program? Yes, we do. We definitely have JD MBA students who participate in a clinic. We have students taking the public administration degree who participate in a clinic. That doesn't seem to have been an issue in terms of time. How many spots are there in a specific clinic in each semester? Every clinic has either 6 or 8 students, with the one exception of the asylum clinic, which has 10 because they actually have 2 faculty members. They have a director and a teaching fellow. So it's a bigger clinic. How are new clinics established? Are there new ones that might be established by our third year that have not been discussed today? So it's a balance between the demand that we're seeing from students and what we have resources for. So we look at the resources that we have. There may be a donor that has a particular interest in funding a certain clinic, and that lines up with an interest that we're getting from students. So the Clemency Clinic, for example, we didn't have a criminal justice clinic in-house. We have fantastic externships at the public defenders and the district attorney's offices in Philadelphia and in the surrounding counties, but we didn't have a clinic. And so students had been asking for a criminal justice clinic, and we had a donor approach us who said, I'm really interested in clemency. And so it was a perfect match. The same thing with the IP clinic. We had students asking for it, and then we had a donor who was interested. It's always possible we could add a new clinic. If anyone happens to know someone who wants to give us millions of dollars to start a new clinic, feel free to let us know. But if you're interested in something, please come and talk to us. I will say at this point, it's getting hard for me to imagine and something you would be interested in that we're not already doing, particularly given that each of our clinics does so many different things, right? So in the CARES clinic, they're doing asylum work, but they're also doing immigration application processing. They're working with families. They're doing so many different things for immigrant communities. We really are dealing with a range of different issues. And I love it when a student comes to me on their 1L year and says, hey, I'm really interested in doing this particular thing. I just had a student come to me and say, I'm really interested in working with people who want to start their own farm. And so I said, let's talk. Maybe we can line it up so that when you're in clinic, we'll find a project where you can do that type of research or that type of representation. So don't hesitate to reach out to us. All right, let's jump on to the students.
I can start talking about the Clemency Clinic a little bit. So I'm in the Clemency Clinic this semester, which, like Professor mentioned, it's the first year at the clinic. I was dying for a clinic experience with criminal defense and also to have Professor Rogers, who is a previous public defender at the school. She's an amazing mentor in the clinic. But I think before I started the clinic experience, I also was kind of like, how could this be that different from an externship? But I will say, to me, it feels extremely different in terms of like the responsibility and just everything in an externship. It definitely feels like something where you can you're in more of a supporting role, but in a clinic, like the whole case is yours. And if something's not getting done, like it's just between you and usually your partner on the case, which has been an amazing experience. I actually went last week to visit our client in a federal prison in Georgia, and he hasn't had a visitor since 2005. So that was obviously a special legal experience, but I think post-conviction work is also somewhere where there's such a lack of resources, because once someone's convicted, if they can't pay for a lawyer, they're filing things on their own. So it's great to have this, clinic directing resources towards that type of work, but also just to be able to treat people in prison like the people they actually are, and just have like a really nice visit goes a long way for them, and just happy to provide like any sort of like human interaction with them as well. I guess I can back up to a little bit and talk about more of what the clinic does just quickly. So we have 3 teams right now that are representing federal prisoners across the country, and we're all on compassionate release cases, which means my client has a life sentence, but I think the other cases they're long sentences. But the point is, we're arguing that there's extraordinary and compelling reasons to reduce their sentences to either time served or a lower sentence, and basing that on things like medical conditions, anything that there's just a list of factors you can just kind of throw in. Anything we can do to get these people home is, what we're trying to do. So that's like the legal aspect. I think like the practical learning aspect, like I mentioned, is really just owning the case start to end. Like it took us so long to even contact the Bureau of Prisons, get through to them, practice like how you can get the counselor to schedule a legal call. Like it's so difficult to even speak to people who are in prison to get them what they need. So I'm trying to think, what is that? Anything else helpful to talk about?
I can jump in. Yeah. Okay. So I am in the CARES clinic, and like Professor Berry said, there's 10 students, 5 teams, and we work with another partner on usually like 2 cases, maybe more, or 1 case, depending on what is needed during that semester. And it's very interesting because we represent clients who are both on the defensive proceedings. So they were caught by an immigration officer and they're in front of a judge and they're claiming asylum as a defense to removal. Or also we have affirmative cases where a person has not been detained, but they are still trying to apply for asylum. And that's not in front of a judge, that is with USCIS, which is like the immigration agency. So a lot of what I do right now, I actually have both cases. So one in removal proceedings and the other one with an affirmative asylum case. And it's amazing because you get to talk to the clients, you get to really connect with them in a way of learning about their experience and go, I don't know about like during my 1L year, I felt like it was so heavily law focused. They teach you how to think like a lawyer. And in the clinic, they taught me how to think, like how to advocate for my clients, which might seem like they're very similar skills, but it's different. It's a different type of thinking that you have to do, because sometimes the legal solution is not always what's best for your client. And I can spend the whole 20 hours talking about that one concept, but we have 10 minutes, I think. So I will make it short and quick. It's an amazing opportunity. I saw a question about time commitment. It depends. I know that's not really much of an answer, but it really does depend. I know for the CARES clinic right now, we need to do 18 hours of clinic work each week. And that's not including the seminar hours. So it's broken up into seminar hours, which is times you go to class, and then time you work with the client, which would be considered those like clinic hours. Yeah, it's been a very fun, hands-on experience. You get to do a lot of different things. It's not only it's very client-informed, client-informed focus, because what you're doing is trying to help individuals who come with you with a particular problem and providing a holistic approach by telling them, we can also help you with something else, depending what their specific issue is. So I've really enjoyed it, and I can answer any specific questions at the end, but I want to make sure we have time for the rest. I'm not sure if anyone else has something to add.
There's one question that said, what do you think is the most beneficial part of your externship or clinic? I would say for my clinic work, it's just like the most practical thing that you're going to do the whole time you're in law school. And I think it teaches you so much more than classes have. And so for me, this clinic makes a lot of sense based on what I want to do post-grad. But I think regardless of what you want to do, it's important to do a clinic experience. Like just being able to handle the case management, I think is probably the most important skill you'd walk away with.
I agree with that. Learning how to organize your cases. File review is a really big aspect of clinic work, making sure everything you get is organized and you're keeping yourself, like time management is another big thing that you learn throughout the clinic, that it doesn't matter where you end up going. It's a valuable skill that you're going to need to learn to practice law.
I'll leave the final word I'll say to maybe Professor Berry and McGovern if they want to say anything before we wrap up. But before we do so, because I'm going to hop off, I'm going to throw into the chat box really quickly the links to the next 2 sessions that are coming up. There's going to be 2 different options simultaneously running. They're recorded, so don't worry. One's going to be on career strategy and professional development. The other one's going to be on joint degrees. I know that a few of you had questions about those individually during this presentation and others, so please feel free to join those. But I'm going to leave now, and if Professor Berry and Professor McGovern, if you all want to sort of wrap things up with a couple of closing words, that would be great.
Thanks a lot, Phil. I noticed a couple of questions in the chat that I don't think have been addressed yet. One was with regard to sports law externships. We have a sports law concentration, as many people know, and we have a number of students that do externships in sports law. And the 3 areas where they most frequently work, I would say, is with sports lawyers and agents, but also with athletics compliance offices at universities. And we have recent grads who have gone into jobs with sports teams and at other universities with their athletics compliance office doing that after they had done it as externs here. And then the third one is we have a terrific graduate who's working with a firm that does a lot of litigation in sports, a lot of it around eligibility for leagues and teams and things like the Olympics. So there's cases where there's allegations of doping and other things like that. So there's also a litigation aspect there in terms of getting into certain competitions, as well as a kind of litigation aspect where players will arbitrate over their salaries. So those are the kind of things that the sports law enthusiasts do. And there was one other question about the timing of externships and clinics, whether it makes sense to do one in the second year. And we have many students that do that. My advice would be do it in the spring semester of your second year, because the fall semester is often very busy for a number of reasons. Thank you, everyone. If you have follow-up questions that you can share with Phil or the admissions folks and they relate to externships, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thanks, everyone. And feel free to reach out to me anytime. My email address is on the website. Feel free to contact me with any questions. I'm also happy to put you in touch with any of our former clinic students in other clinics if you wanted to talk to them in particular about their experiences. But thank you all so much.